Mubin Shaikh is a former undercover counterterrorism operative and a former radical Muslim. So he actually became a jihadist at one point. And he went on the show here, and he's going to speak to the media about what led to that.
Self-radicalized, and this was 20 years ago? Close to 20 years ago.
April 1995.
You went to Pakistan. How did this happen to you? And then you recruited others. What was it about you that was willing to go along with this?
I think it's the same case for many of these individuals. Identity crises. You don't know. You're trying to navigate the space in the West. How Muslim am I supposed to be, and how Western am I supposed to be, and how much does that conflict and contradict with one another? And you're going to go towards those who welcome you with open arms. That's really what it comes down to. When you're dealing with angry, young, disenfranchised, or at least feel that they're disenfranchised, they may not even be discriminated against like I wasn't discriminated against, but they'll feel that my people are under attack, and you have vicarious suffering.
So this is a really important and interesting conversation, in my opinion, because two communities that I'm a part of disagree on this. You have the atheist community, led by people like Richard Dawkins, Sam Harris, formerly Christopher Hitchens, and others, who basically come out and say, well, don't give me any bullshit rationalizations. The reality is, if somebody becomes a radical Muslim or a fundamentalist, the buck stops with them. Okay? They at some point make a decision and go into the lifestyle, and it's about personal responsibility and individualism. Don't make excuses. Tell them they're wrong. Explain why they're wrong and how they're wrong and the facts and all this stuff. And that's the end of the conversation right there, okay? And then you have the progressive community, which says something very different from that. They say, well, look, whenever anybody becomes radicalized or they become a fundamentalist of any stripe, there's always a lot more that goes into it. You have political reasons, economic reasons. When you live in extreme poverty, the incidence of people turning to extreme ideologies and terrorism rises dramatically. So there's a lot of other things that go into it. And to simply say, you know, it's on you, you're wrong, it's an individual thing, that's naive, because you're saying somebody lives in a vacuum, and they don't live in a vacuum. A lot of other things go into it, and there are approaches and steps that we could take which would limit the likelihood that somebody becomes a jihadist or a radical of any stripe. So, listening to this little clip here, this little segment of what Mubin Shaikh said, again, this is a guy who was a jihadist at one point. What's my conclusion? What do I take away here? Both sides are right. Now, the atheists are right in the sense that it's true that in the final summation, the buck does stop with you as an individual, and you're making the choice to join a radical group or to become a terrorist. And so that's true, and like he's describing, certain things come from the individual. So an identity crisis or the idea of fitting in, like where am I going to be accepted with open arms? Oh, online I found this community of whatever radical Muslims who accept me for who I am, so I'm going to go with them because they're willing to spend some time with me and to hang out and to treat me like an equal, etc., etc. But then there's this other aspect that he briefly mentions there. He says, well, I wasn't disenfranchised, but I felt disenfranchised, and it's like, oh, we are under attack, so let's lash out. That's the area that lends credibility to the progressive argument that, and you see it all the time with drone strikes from the U.S., how, you know, we've killed so many innocent people in Pakistan, Yemen, and Somalia with our drone strikes that otherwise moderate people or formerly neutral people have decided, well, you killed my aunt or my uncle or my sister or my cousin, so now I'm going to pick up an AK-47 and join the Taliban or join Al-Qaeda or join Al-Shabaab or join ISIS or join Al-Nusra Front. And the list goes on, Boko Haram, all these different extremist jihadist groups. So both are right. So the reality is this. Yes, the buck stops with the individual because people are super poor in Mississippi. It's the poorest state in the U.S., but are they turning to radical terrorism? Well, most of them, no. It's certainly true that some of them do. Like we go over time and time again, sovereign citizens they turn to abortion clinic bombers, they turn to the KKK. But still, with them and with radical Muslims, the buck does stop with you. There are plenty of people who are poor that have not turned to such insane levels of extremism, okay? But also what the U.S. needs to do and what we should do as individuals is take all the precautionary measures to make sure that we don't push somebody further in that direction. So in other words, if you set up a system where people are treated fairly and kindly and you don't wage stupid wars that kill innocent people and you don't have people who are in extreme poverty, so you give them health care, you give them education, you give them an equal opportunity, and you name it, right? If you give people enough of an opportunity, extremism levels will drop tremendously. And then at that point is when it's fair to say, whenever anybody makes a decision to become a terrorist, it's 100% on them. And at that point, the atheists would be right and the progressives would just be making excuses. But as of today, it's a mixed picture. Both of them are right. Yes, the buck does stop with the individual, but the political situation, the economic situation, the reality of the misery of poverty in the world feeds into what decision they end up making. The final thing I'll mention here, just to further buttress this point, look in Greece right now. The unemployment rate in Greece is about equal to what it was in the U.S. during the Great Depression. And what's happened as a result of that? The Golden Dawn Party, which is a neo-Nazi party, has become incredibly popular. They even got seats in the government in Greece, okay? Not only that, there's also a gigantic rise of communism. So radical right, radical left, extremism and terrorism increases as the economy gets worse and poverty gets worse. So, yes, the buck does stop with the individual because you need to choose to put on that bomb and go kill yourself, and you need to choose to become a sovereign citizen and shoot at officers. And you need to choose all these things. So the buck does stop with you, and we're not taking away your responsibility. You're wrong, and we're going to tell you why you're wrong because you're incorrect, right, and acting immoral and unethical. But be open to the reality that certain things push somebody in that direction, and we should get rid of the fertile soil which leads to the growth of those negative things.